You're standing alone. It's 300,000 years ago. No one's around. The fire's gone out. And something just happened to you. Maybe you lost something. Maybe you got hurt. Maybe someone you loved just walked off into the dark and didn't come back. And your eyes start leaking water. Not because you're bleeding, not because there's smoke in the air, just water. Streaming down your face, for no physical reason at all. Here's the part that should genuinely bother you. No other animal on Earth does this. Dogs don't do it. Elephants, famously emotional, famously smart, known to grieve their dead for days, do not sit there leaking water because they're sad. Your closest living relative, the chimpanzee, shares 98% of your DNA and still does not cry from emotion. Not once. Not ever. Somewhere in the last few 100,000 years, humans developed a completely useless, biologically expensive, evolutionarily bizarre habit of crying. Not from pain, not from onions, from feelings, and we never grew out of it. So today we're answering the question nobody actually teaches you. Why do humans cry? Not the mechanics. Not tear ducts, got it, the actual why. Why did evolution allow this? What was it for? And why, after literally everything else about us has changed, have we never stopped doing it? By the end of this video, you're never going to look at crying, yours or anyone else's, the same way again. Let's start with the tears themselves. Your eyes make water constantly. Right now, as you watch this, a thin layer of tears is sitting on your eyeball, keeping it lubricated. That's called a basal tear, and it happens every second of every day, whether you're happy, sad, or completely emotionally dead inside. Then there's reflex tears. Cut an onion, get shampoo in your eye, walk into the wind. Your eyes flood on purpose, fast, to flush out whatever's irritating them. Pure mechanical defense. Every animal with eyes basically does some version of this. And then there's the third kind, psychic tears. Emotional tears, the ones that show up when you're grieving, or overwhelmed, or watching a movie where the dog doesn't make it. Here's the detail that should stop you. Scientists have actually analyzed the chemical makeup of these three tear types, and emotional tears are different. Researcher William Frey ran one of the most famous studies on this back in the 1980s, and found that emotional tears contain higher concentrations of stress-related hormones and proteins than basal or reflex tears, including trace amounts of substances linked to the body's stress response. Your body didn't just decide to leak water when you're sad. It manufactured a specific chemical formula for the occasion. Meanwhile, it still hasn't figured out a way to warn you before a Charlie horse wrecks your entire night. Priorities. Obviously, nobody has a fossil of a 300,000-year-old teardrop. Tears don't preserve, so anthropologists can't point to a date and say, this is when it began. But they can look at the hardware. The brain structures involved in emotional crying, parts of the limbic system, the same general network tied to social bonding and vocalization, are old. Older than modern humans. Which tells us the machinery for this was already sitting there long before Homo sapiens showed up to use it for something new. And the leading theory for where it actually started is almost insultingly simple: babies. Human infants are born catastrophically helpless. No claws, no fur thick enough to matter, can't walk, can't feed themselves, can't do anything except exist, and hope someone notices. So evolution gave them one tool: a distress signal loud enough and disruptive enough that an adult has to respond. Crying, the sound and eventually the tears, may have started as an infant survival mechanism, a way to guarantee attention in a species where parental investment is everything. And the theory goes that adult emotional crying is essentially a holdover. We never fully switched it off. We just started using the same 300,000-year-old alarm system for breakups. Here's something that should make the infant origin theory hit different. Newborns cry constantly, but for the first several weeks of life, they don't actually produce emotional tears at all. Their tear ducts aren't fully developed yet. A newborn can scream at full volume, red-faced, completely inconsolable, and cry bone dry. The tears themselves usually don't show up until somewhere around 2 to 12 weeks old, once the plumbing finally catches up to the performance. Once it does show up, it shows up hard. Infants cry, on average, close to 2 hours a day in the first few months of life. 2 hours. Every day. That's not a rough patch, that's the baseline. And then something happens that nobody really talks about. It drops off a cliff. By toddlerhood, crying frequency is already falling. By the time you hit your teenage years, you're crying a fraction of what you did as an infant. By adulthood, the average person cries something like once every few weeks. Some studies put general adult frequency far lower than that, depending on how you define cried. So somewhere between helpless infant and adult sitting in a work meeting, your body quietly negotiated itself down from 2 hours a day to a handful of times a month. Which raises the obvious question, if the system fades that dramatically, why doesn't it just finish the job and disappear completely? Evolution is usually ruthless about deleting things that stop being useful. But it doesn't disappear. It just waits. And there's some evidence the curve isn't even a straight line down. Several researchers who study aging have noted that crying frequency may tick back up later in life, particularly around increased vulnerability, grief, and dependency in older age. The system that was loudest when you were most helpless as an infant may partially reactivate when you become more vulnerable again decades later. Same alarm, same 300,000-year-old wiring, just dialed up and down depending on how much the world currently expects you to be able to handle on your own. So, the real mystery isn't just why we cry, it's why evolution kept the system running, at a fraction of its original volume, for an entire lifetime, instead of shutting it off the moment we stopped being helpless infants. That's where the competing theories come in. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because scientists don't fully agree on why this stuck around into adulthood. There are 4 major theories, and honestly, they're probably all a little bit true at once. Theory 1. Attachment and social bonding. Crying is what researchers call a costly, hard-to-fake signal. Basically, it's difficult to cry on command, which means when someone sees you crying, they trust it's real. That trust pulls people toward you. It signals genuine distress in a way words can't fully fake, and it triggers a caretaking response in the people around you. Theory 2. Vulnerability signaling. This one's darker and weirder. Tears physically blur your vision. You are, quite literally, making yourself worse at detecting threats while you cry. Some researchers argue that's the entire point. You're broadcasting "I am compromised right now," which is a strange thing to do unless, on some deep evolutionary level, you trust the people around you enough to let your guard down. Crying in front of someone is an act of vulnerability with actual biological stakes attached. And here's where this theory gets a genuinely wild piece of actual science behind it. In 2011, researchers at the Weizmann Institute ran an experiment where men were exposed to women's emotional tears. Not sad stories, not crying sounds, just the literal chemical scent of the tears themselves, with no emotional context attached. The men's testosterone dropped. Their arousal dropped. Brain scans showed reduced activity in regions tied to aggression and sexual arousal. Nobody told these men what the liquid was. Their bodies just chemically responded to tears as a signal, automatically, below conscious awareness, the same way you'd flinch from a threat you didn't consciously register. Which means tears might not just be a visual signal, they might be a chemical one too, a literal molecule, doing the convincing before the brain even catches up. Theory 3. Crying as detox. This is the one people love repeating, and it's partially true. The idea that crying flushes stress hormones like cortisol out of your system, which is why you sometimes feel physically lighter afterward. The research on this is more mixed than the cry it out it's healthy crowd usually admits. But there is a real physiological shift that happens during and after a good cry. Theory 4, and this is the one that annoys everyone who wants a clean answer. Some researchers think emotional crying might not be a designed feature at all. It might be what evolutionary biologists call a spandrel, a byproduct. Your brain already had wiring for tear production, basal, reflex, and wiring for emotional overwhelm. Some scientists argue crying might just be those two systems accidentally overlapping, a side effect that never got selected for, but also never got selected against, because it wasn't costly enough to disappear. In other words, maybe crying isn't a feature. Maybe it's a bug evolution simply never bothered to patch. So basically, somewhere in your evolutionary history, your body invented a costly, hard-to-fake, vision-impairing, chemically broadcasting advertisement whose entire message is, "Please don't attack me right now, I am experiencing feelings." and scientists still can't fully agree whether that was the plan all along, or just a very persistent glitch. And it worked well enough, plan or glitch, that every human on Earth still does it. Let's talk about why it's tears specifically, and not just sound. Here's a detail most people never stop to ask. Plenty of animals vocalize distress. Dogs whimper. Primates shriek. Elephants make specific low-frequency calls linked to distress and grief. But none of them cry. The sound is common in the animal kingdom. The tears are the actual mystery. And this loops back to the honest signal theory. A sound is cheap. You can fake a whimper. You genuinely cannot fake producing chemically distinct tears on command. Not the way real emotional crying does it. The tears are proof of authenticity in a way that noise alone never could be. It's less, I'm making a sound, and more, my body is physically demonstrating that this is real, whether I want it to or not. Here's the part that's going to feel personal. You've had this experience, you're at work or on a train or in a meeting, and something hits you. Bad news, an overwhelming memory, whatever, and your eyes start welling up, and you spend the next 10 minutes doing everything humanly possible to physically stop it. Staring at the ceiling, pinching your hand, thinking about taxes, biting the inside of your cheek hard enough to redirect the feeling somewhere else. Suddenly developing a very urgent need to check your phone so nobody can see your face. Claiming, unconvincingly, that you just have something in your eye, a lie so universally understood that everyone in the room quietly agrees to accept it. That fight is completely pointless, and here's why. The system that's doing this to you is 300,000 years old. It evolved in small hunter-gatherer groups where crying in front of your people was safe, expected, and useful. It did not evolve with a setting for, but what if this happens during a Zoom call with your boss? Modern life added an entire layer of social rules. Don't cry at work, don't cry in public, definitely don't cry in an argument you're trying to win, and absolutely do not cry during a job interview, even though you are being evaluated by a stranger while discussing your own life's trajectory, which is, statistically, one of the more legitimately stressful conversations a person can have. Even the good moments aren't safe. People cry at weddings, at graduations, watching someone else succeed at something, and immediately feel the need to apologize for it, laughing through it, saying, sorry, I don't know why I'm crying, as if joy needed an excuse. All of that, the excuses, the apologies, the eye-pinching, is layered on top of a biological alarm system that has zero concept of professionalism, weddings, job interviews, or Tuesdays. You're not broken when you can't stop crying at an inconvenient moment. You're running ancient software on hardware built for open-air campfires, not open-plan offices. Which, honestly, explains a lot about most group chat channels. Quick, important detail before we wrap this up. Crying frequency is not universal, and it's not purely biological either. Cross-cultural research, most notably from psychologist Ad Vingerhoutz, who spent decades studying crying scientifically, has found real documented differences in how often people cry across countries and genders, shaped heavily by social permission, not just hormones. Some of that gap does have a biological piece. Hormonal differences have been proposed as a partial factor, but a huge amount of it comes down to which societies treat crying as acceptable and which ones treat it as weakness. And some cultures have gone in a completely different direction. They've turned crying into something you actively schedule. In Japan, there's a real, organized practice called rui katsu, roughly tear-seeking, group sessions where people gather specifically to watch sad films together and cry on purpose, as a form of stress relief, because the emotional release is considered genuinely healthy enough to plan your week around. Compare that to certain professional and cultural contexts, where an adult crying, especially a man crying, has historically been treated as a career-ending display of weakness. Same nervous system, same tear ducts, completely opposite social verdict, depending entirely on which country and which decade you happen to be born into. Worth sitting with for a second, the thing you think of as a deeply personal, involuntary reaction is actually being shaped, in real time, by the culture around you. So let's go back to that person, alone, 300,000 years ago, standing by a dead fire with water running down their face for no physical reason at all. They weren't malfunctioning. They were running one of the oldest, most quietly sophisticated systems the human body has ever built. A signal engineered over hundreds of thousands of years to do one specific job: prove, in a way that couldn't be faked, that something real was happening inside them, and that they needed the people around them to notice. Every time you've cried, at a funeral, at a movie, at 2 a.m. for no reason you can fully explain, you were running that exact same ancient program. Turns out the most irrational thing your body does might actually be one of the most deliberate. If this messed with your head a little, subscribe, because next time, we're going somewhere even weirder.